Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. This is Will, the Redhead Engineer, and today we're going to be doing a short tutorial video over the Veeam Size Estimation tool. Now you can find this on veeambp.com, which is our new and improved best practices page, where you can also find our Veeam Best Practices Guide for 2020. So if you are unfamiliar with this page, I'll have a link in the description down below for you to check out all of this. But today, we are going to be focusing around the Veeam Size Estimator tool. So this will be great for any new customers or existing customers looking for a new deployment of Veeam, where we'll be able to tell you not only resources, but mainly storage requirements as well. Now, when we first go in here, you'll see I'll add a workload, and as your first time coming to this page, we're just going to create a new one. Now I will go ahead and give this the name test123, as you've seen us do in previous videos, and most of this information is pre-populated. So this is all options you're going to have built out by default, and really, most of these we don't even have to change. Your first thing, we're going to select a VM-based backup compared to an agent, and you do have the ability to select multiple sites. So if this is a setup where you have active sites, you can customize retention for both of these. But in our traditional setup today, we're going to be deploying this as if site A was our production site and site B was our DR site. Now you can see here at the bottom, our backup copy jobs, that's where we'll be able to set up retention for that second site. So you'll see more on that here in a minute. The first thing though, our source size. The raw amount of data that we are looking at protecting is around 10 terabytes by default. I'm going to go ahead and actually raise this up to about 100 terabytes, but this is completely customized by you. So this is regardless of any existing compression and deduplications or current backups you're using. This is strictly raw source storage size. From there, we can go into yearly growth, which is defaulted to 10%, and that is a good number to keep it at. I will be leaving this at the default 10%, as you'll see I do with a few other options going through the list. Now the next piece, the scope. We will once again leave this by default just at 3 years to give you a good estimation of things. And our backup window, we will also just leave that default at 8 hours. Traditionally, customers will want an overnight backup window, so 8 hours lets us almost oversize things to make sure we get these increments done in time. From there, though, we get over to the daily change rate and the reduction, both of which we're going to leave by default again. And this reduction here, this is Veeam's compression and deduplication rates. So we will keep this at 50%, which is a conservative number for Veeam's inherent compression and dedupe. Of course, is this a dedupe appliance that you're writing to? You can, of course, raise that number. From there, VM quantity. We will leave this at 200, which is what it just defaulted out to. So we have about 200 total VMs and 100 terabytes in storage for this environment. Then our server to disk ratio is again good at 3, something you can customize for yourself in your own environment. But then moving on to per VM backups. This is a setting Veeam has and highly encourages when, again, you're using these dedupe appliances. So Dell Data Domain, HPE Store Once, Exagrid, or Quantum DXi are all of the supported dedupe appliances. But for today, we're assuming that you're going to leave this as a traditional disk-based repository. From there, we then finally come to the REFS and XFS settings. This is Veeam's integration with clone blocking. So the integration on REFS for the Windows side or the XFS side with Linux are both available and highly recommended if you are performing synthetic full backups. I'll leave a link below to the Veeam blog post that explains this a little more in detail, but again, a highly recommended option. Now from there, we go down to the backup jobs. You can see my daily points, weekly points, and longer term retention is all available, but the logic behind this is your first backup location. So most customers want a little bit less storage on the production network and will have that DR site for long term. So we'll go ahead and change this down to 7 points in this case. So just a week worth of retention, 1 full and 6 incremental backups living on that local storage. And then we'll come here to backup copy job. That way we'll be able to customize the daily points, leaving those at 30 for the DR site, but adding 4 weekly and 1 yearly backup to that DR site. Now, once you see we've finished out this page, you have a couple of options with the cloud tier. This is primarily for archiving your backups. So we're saying from your first backup job, if we want to archive anything off or move it, not copy it, we can enable this option here. But when we go to the Objects tab at the top of this screen and proceed on, you'll notice that we're assuming a copy mode by default from that first backup job. So instead of just moving these backups after a delay, in this case 7 days, I'm going to go ahead and just disable this and push everything off as a copy into AWS or Azure or Wasabi. For any type of object storage provider, that is going to be your better option, at least from what I see on a day-to-day basis with my customers. Of course, if you do want to use that as an archiving option, it's right there for you. From there, we're going to go ahead and jump back to the main screen. You can see once we've calculated this out, you have the total number of VMs, the sites, and then we're able to hop into this object tab. This is where we're going to give you an estimation around the pricing from your object storage provider. Now, this does differ from provider to provider, and this little note is just saying that it is an estimation. Very first thing we're going to do, you can see that I am doing the copy only mode. So this is taking the same retention I have for my on-prem backups and pushing this out into the cloud. First thing from there is I will select my workload. So there's test 1, 2, 3. You can see the source amount of data, just daily changes that we're keeping, and even that 10% yearly growth. We have all of that assumed in here just by the defaults. And the only thing we're copying off is that 7-day retention policy. From there you can see Veeam's capacity is going to be growing over time, so we did the initial push and then increments, so we start at 65 terabytes and really grow from there, assuming Veeam's compression and dedupe. But we're also able to show you the cost associated with things. So the very first run, my transaction costs are substantially higher because that is the first ingest, the first push of all of those full backups. Afterwards, the increments are going to lessen that transaction cost, but it is still going to be there on certain providers. Again, other providers might not charge you the put requests or might not even charge you any type of API costs at all. So this really does come down to a vendor by vendor basis. You can also export this out to Excel if you need to give it to any higher ups, but all of this information, most of which was predetermined by this calculator, very easy to see. Hopping back into the dashboard though, we're able to see a holistic view of everything. So the requirements for Veeam to run both our SQL Server, even our Enterprise Manager, which is our web console, we include all of those options there at the top. And you can see, probably what you came here to see, the repository capacities. So for Site A, we have about 112 terabytes with that 7 days worth of retention. But for Site B, we go up to 275 terabytes, even using REFS, because we have 30 days of total retention, 4 weekly full backups, and a yearly full on top of that. Below here, you can also circle back to more requirements. With these proxies and repositories, we do have requirements as well, but this is not telling you to deploy a separate proxy. You can add these two values together if you are using an all-in-one solution or maybe a single virtual machine, as we would be in this case. But regardless of your deployment, virtual, physical, or an all-in-one solution, we will let you know what those requirements are going to be. Of course, these requirements for physical servers, it's assuming you bought a pretty decent physical server, most of which are wildly oversized for Veeam, but you can see once we break this down, what we're talking about in terms of quantity of machines, what we're talking about in terms of storage, and where all of this capacity really breaks down. So for Site A and Site B, I'm going to be able to see all of my requirements for each, whether it is just the backup copy or the backups and backup copy. Again, this just comes down to your setup, whether this is an active deployment or a simple production side and DR site. As a whole, everyone, that was a very quick overview for our calculator. Hopefully this gave you a good idea and prepared you for being able to come in and look through all of this information and size out your Veeam environment. Of course, if you guys have any questions, I highly recommend contact your local Veeam engineering team for any recommendations or any more assistance. Thanks so much, everyone.